Good morning, Mr. Khalid.
Good morning.
It's unfortunate we won't have time to discuss the hospitality sector today. So, Mr. Khalid, thank you so much for being with us first. And let's try to understand the history of Alba. How did this company that was established in the late 60s, early 70s, and it was probably the first project in Bahrain's diversification, economic diversification. How did it become one of the biggest aluminium smelters in the world outside China?
Well, first of all, good morning. I'm delighted to be here at Gateway Gulf. I was involved in the first edition, and I'm delighted to see it back again. My congratulations to Her Excellency and the team at the EDB and the organizers for an excellent, well-organized event. So I think the history of Alba is intertwined with the diversification journey of the Kingdom of Bahrain. If we think about it before we get into Alba, it started, of course, in the 60s with the diversification into non-oil industry, and we'll talk a bit about Alba's role in that. But it evolved as well with telecoms in the early 80s, banking, with the entry of offshore banking in Bahrain in the 80s. The establishment of Gulf Air was the first national airline that involved several countries, which made Bahrain a hub for transport and logistics. So the journey of diversification started with Alba. As you correctly mentioned, the foundation stone was set in 1968 by Rahmatullah alayh, the late Emir Sheikh Isa bin Salman Al Khalifa. It was started in 1971 with 120,000 tons in lines 1 to 2. And that capacity was increased over time. Today, with 6 lines, the most recently line introduced in 2019, we stand at 1.6 million tons of aluminium. That's the largest production outside, in a single site outside of China. But I think if we look at Alba, it today represents more than just that size. And I'll mention a few statistics. It produces its own electricity. It's the largest producer of electricity in Bahrain, 3,800 megawatts, 5 power plants. So it is a major contributor to the electricity. Some of that is introduced to the grid. It is the largest market capitalization company on the Bahrain Stock Exchange after Ahli United Bank was acquired by Kuwait Finance House. It represents, aluminium in general represents 12% of the 15% manufacturing industry in Bahrain. About 9 to 10% of that alone comes from Alba. Employs 3,200 people. Is a major contributor to non-oil exports, sells to 50 countries, 240 customers globally in the US, Asia, and Europe. So it is a major industrial contributor to the country, a major employer, a major power producer. And I think it was the first wave of that diversification. It was the first success in that diversification. It allowed downstream industry to build around that. And it then emboldened Bahrain to continue in, as I mentioned, tourism, banking, and so forth and so on.
And the presence of Alba allowed the manufacturing sector to contribute significantly to Bahrain's GDP. It now stands, this contribution as a whole for the manufacturing stands at around 14%. It comes in third place after financial services and oil and gas. And you mentioned the diversification that we are seeing in Bahrain. It's the most diversified economy. 84% of the economy is non-oil. So in regards to the manufacturing sector, why can't we have another champion similar to Alba?
Well, I think, Lara, I think there's every intention to have new champions. But Alba existed in a certain time period. You were looking at electricity being cheaper in this part of the world, where you could import alumina, apply electricity to the production process, and export externally. I think we live in a new reality now where that electricity competitiveness is no longer present. What we have to do is think about what are the industries of the future. And we'll talk a bit about every country in the Gulf is thinking about this. How can I introduce manufacturing in my economy? How can I widen the manufacturing base to move from being a consumer to a producer? I think in Bahrain, we are looking at several new champions. It makes sense for a country of the size of Bahrain to continue to develop downstream aluminium. If you've invested this much into Alba, why am I exporting raw aluminium? And we've made steps. We have Aliester, which is a Mumtalakat company that has built a facility in Bahrain. It's a Spanish company that has expanded to Bahrain to take some of that aluminium and create a final product. We have other industries like Bilexico, Garmco. So Connexus Aluminium, which is creating metal rods. But we want to do more. We're still very low on the value chain. Aluminium is a metal of the future. If you look at electric vehicles, they want to use that lighter metal. Aircraft industry uses aluminium. So how do we move closer to the final product and create downstream aluminium industries that are just around Alba? I think for Bahrain also, just because of the size of the country, fast-moving consumer goods, that industry, it makes sense. You can do it on a smaller land size. We do have a smaller country in land size. So we've had successes in companies like Mondelez. This is FDI that has come into the country.
Arla also.
Yes, absolutely. So I think these are industries. I also think green manufacturing is going to become more important. We signed an agreement yesterday with Daiki Aluminium, which is a 100-year-old Japanese company, family-owned, because we had a byproduct of our process that was, it's called dross, that was basically not used. And so with Daiki, we are going to make an investment in Alba that will recycle some of the byproduct and create a final product, again, that can be used in the steel industry, in aluminium. So it's not just because it's environmentally friendly, it's also because the circular economy is going to become quite important.
You talked about the local supply chain and the weak local supply chain. Can we learn from the programs that are being applied in neighboring countries, in Saudi Arabia, for instance, the localization programs that we are seeing with Aramco, with the PIF, where partners are asked to work with local suppliers. And this way, they want to support the local manufacturers and support the local supply chain. Is this something that should be done here?
I think the government has made steps in that direction. It's local content to encourage any contractor or bidder or supplier, as you mentioned, Lara, to have a content that is either employment or product and so forth. To my mind, that is a potential solution, but if you're in a smaller country, your leverage in that regard is weaker. If I'm the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where I want to capture more of the value, I could possibly use that. But if it raises my costs, it may be counterproductive in the long term. I think the way that we should look about, and we've heard it all throughout Gateway Gulf, the way that we should look at value addition is not just on a national level. We should look at it on a regional and a GCC level. And I believe that even if you look at all our markets, yes, GDP is about 2 trillion. GDP will probably grow to 3+ trillion in the next 5 to 6 years. In the scheme of China, Asia, India, Europe, the United States, that is still significant, but not with an overweight. I think we have to think about how we look at the GCC beyond just national borders, and how do we become more integrated. And we've looked at a transaction recently in Alba, where we think this is the future. The future is to think about cross-border M&A in order to be able to grow beyond your national border.
And this is what we are seeing. Alba is looking to merge its operations with with the aluminium operations of Saudi Ma'aden. So my question to you, I have to ask you, what's the latest on this deal?
Well, the first disclaimer is that the transaction is, of course, we've announced it, but until we sign, it's not done. But the logic here is that Ma'aden will contribute their aluminium smelter assets, which are held in Ma'aden Aluminium Company, the full share capital of that, their alumina refinery and their bauxite mining, in return for the issuance of shares by Alba. To us, this is the first potential cross-border M&A transaction in the GCC. We've seen in banking mergers on a national level, but never two entities in two different GCC countries. And to me, this creates critical mass. We become together the 7th largest aluminium manufacturer in the world. For Alba, we have vertical integration through bauxite mining and an alumina refinery. For Ma'aden, it has the market reach. Alba's been in business for 55 years, or 54 years, I should say. It has the reach of our marketing. We have offices in Zurich, in the United States, in Asia. We have value-added products represent about 73% of our exports. We also have the benefit of looking at, for Alba, looking at the Saudi market, because we will have a Saudi investor. We have SABIC today, but with Ma'aden we'll have a significant Saudi investor and shareholder that will allow us to have access to the Saudi growth story. And this is what I mean by we should look beyond our borders. We should look at a wider opportunity. And I think that together as well, we have the ability to handle the green aluminium and the renewable energy, which is becoming very important globally. Not just because, again, our customers require it, regulation is looking at that. And I think we in Alba, and I know Ma'aden thinks the same, are looking at recycling. We're looking at green energy through solar or otherwise. This is going to be imperative, and when you consolidate, you're able to handle these challenges.
And when do we expect the deal to close? By the end of the year?
No, that will be too soon. I think it will probably be in between Q1 and Q2 of next year.
Looking at the UAE, on the other hand, because we have also a giant in the aluminium sector, we have the Emirates Global Aluminium, and it's also the biggest industrial company outside the oil and gas in the UAE. Let's take a look about what the UAE is doing. I'm asking you this because we don't have a voice from UAE on this panel, but I would like to hear your insights. The UAE also aims to increase significantly the share of the industrial sector in its GDP, and it's focusing more on the future industries, on the fourth industrial revolution technologies. It aims to make UAE a hub for future factories. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not the expert on the UAE, but I will share with you what I know about what is happening. First of all, the UAE has announced Operation 300 billion. This is a target to increase manufacturing's contribution to their GDP from 115 billion dirhams to about 300 billion dirhams. And they've targeted, as you've correctly mentioned, Lara, the renewables, the Industry 4.0. But EGA on its own is going to represent about a third of that growth. So aluminium and the downstream aluminium industry in the UAE will play a very important role. Again, it's a metal of the future, and I think it has a significant role to play in the future. So I think it is a cornerstone of their strategy. I think what the UAE has done very intelligently over the last few years is Masdar. And Masdar's role was a visionary investment. Masdar's role in looking at proactive investment globally and to bring that technology to the UAE in not only renewables, but waste to energy, the circular economy. They're looking at waste to energy. They're a player in many countries around the world. So I think that element is going to play a big role in the UAE's industrial strategy. And I believe that, finally, I think that they are looking at Industry 4.0, but so is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I mean, so is every country in the world. But Industry 4.0 is an enhancer to your production. It's a way for you to get process improvement, supply chain management, optimization of manufacturing, energy efficiency. How you build that, whether it's a service provider, and I think data analytics and the service industries are what will complement industry in that regard. I think that's going to play a huge role in the future.
And going back to Saudi Arabia, they're betting on the mining sector, and they see the mining sector as their third pillar after oil and gas and after petrochemicals. Do you think that this bet will succeed?
Without doubt. I think the resources of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia are tremendous. Not only in, we've talked about bauxite, it's our discussions with Mahadan around that, but around gold, copper. I was at LME Week a few weeks ago, and copper has a tremendous potential from a price perspective. So I think Saudi Arabia's focus on mining will pay dividends. But I think the potential of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to enter into manufacturing, we've heard about the desire and the ambition through Vision 2030 to look at electric vehicle manufacturing, through their investment in Lucid, to look at component manufacturing. Tremendous potential. And we know the legacy of the kingdom through Aramco, SABIC, the size of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the reach, and I know that they can build on that in not only mining, but in the industries of the future.
We have less than 2 minutes. My last question to you, as a concluding remark, after all these discussions, what would you like to see more in Bahrain in terms to support the industrial sector, in terms maybe of related to regulations, related to funding, or related to infrastructure?
I think that it's related to all three. We've succeeded in the past by creating industrial parks. We've seen that happen, even if you look at Silicon Valley in the United States. They created a park for technology next to a university, and that developed. I think and the government has been talking about this, if we want to develop an industry like downstream aluminium, we need to think holistically. We need to target the right companies. Not the bottom of the value chain, at the top of the value chain. We need to combine it with very affordable rent and land pricing. We need to invest in the infrastructure, the electricity and the roads and utilities. We need to locate it next to a national champion like Alba. We need to put incentives like financing. I think that is what we need to do in a very focused manner. So we can talk about downstream aluminium as we've done as a national champion. But unless we put those incentives, unless we put that package together, and then selectively choose the right tenants, we won't be able to move as fast as we'd like. That's my desire.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khalid, for a great session today, for sharing your insights with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.